Welcome to The Life Engineer with Matty J. He unpacks and interviews guests to share the tools, components, and software that's needed to build a life and mindset by design versus one of default.
Bosh, welcome to the podcast, Eze.
Lovely to be here.
So we've been talking about doing this for a bit, on and off the last probably month or two.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about the Business-Flow Workbook. But before we start, if you just introduce yourself, where you sort of come, your background, and then just talk about this first stage of the Business-Flow Workbook where we first met.
Okay, yeah, I'll give a brief intro to myself. So by background, I trained as a civil engineer. So I was working as a structural engineer for a couple of years before I joined the lift company as a assistant project manager. So that was really my first introduction to lifts and project management in the construction side. I was working as a consultant before. So I worked for a lift company for 5 years, graduating from a assistant project manager to a project manager working on some mega projects. Very, very interesting, complex and stressful, but nevertheless a fantastic experience. And following that, I moved into another company where I now work as a service manager. And as part of that move, that's where I was introduced to yourself at my now current boss.
So this is Canary Wharf. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, this is Canary Wharf, where I'm currently working now, and this is in the role as a service manager, which is it's similar. It's within lift industry, but however, a service manager is completely different to a project manager, and even where you sit in the whole life cycle of the project. So for me, it was something similar, something I understood, but something I knew there was a wide range of different things I'm gonna have to come up to speed with and start to learn.
So we first met in Starbucks.
That's correct. Yes. So that was after I accepted the job, but waiting for the contract. You know, that whole fantastic limbo period. But no, we did. We met in Starbucks, and it was where we came to kind of introduce me a bit further to the role. Which, speaking to my boss Reese, it was something I was really interested in. It was also twofold. I think from your perspective, you wanted to have the opportunity to, you know, meet me, introduce me into what we were going to do, or what I would try and make myself familiarized with the role before joining. And for me, it was a case of trying to get to sit there and learn a bit more about what I'm going to be doing. So when we met, it's almost like a perfect synergy where what both people wanted out of that day, actually set up to achieve.
Because you had been interviewed by Reese, and at the time I'd been asked to come in and work. It was twofold, really. One was to cover for the role that had been made available. And two was to pick up and work on where we had left off with some business coaching on developing what's now become the Business-Flow Workbook, which was called the book initially. And this is where we developed the Business-Flow Workbook for lift and escalators and these employee interfaces.
Yeah.
So that comes back down to the first time we met. So Reese had explained the Business-Flow Workbook as part of your interview, hadn't he?
He had done. So he had touched on it quite briefly and said, so this is the business flow. This is kind of an introduction of how things run in our department. At that stage, we hadn't gone too much into it. It was mostly focused on the job role, the job description, and just making sure that, you know, as a person, as an individual, I was aligned to it and whether I had the skills to undertake it and where the gaps were. So that's where it started off for the main part. So the real introduction to the business flow kind of came in at Starbucks when I think he actually produced the book. It was in an envelope, and I was like, "Oh, what's in this? This is a nice little present to start the job with." And I remember looking through it, and for me, it was wonderful the first time I looked at it because I had no idea what we were going to be doing in the department. I had no idea from the start of say a lifter gets finished. Because I understand finishing lifts up to that point, because I've been a PM. From the point where you finish a lift through to the life cycle of modernizing it, I had a overview of what could be done, but no idea what was actually done. So to have it kind of broken down to me in 6 steps, it was very beneficial, because then I could see initially how it was going to flow from the point of us receiving something to the point of us actually putting it back into our own service portfolio.
So you worked before for the major lift company that was installing the lifts for Canary Wharf as part of Canary Wharf construction.
Correct.
So you would deliver the lift unit, and then you moved into a role where you worked as Canary Wharf as the service manager, managing that unit through its what we call life cycle. Which is sort of, you know, from 15 to 30 years of service. So what's the what is it? So I've got these downfall games that I sort of helps me explain the system and process of it. I use analogies in coaching, boxing, gardening, and engineering. So this really was from the lift point of thing, because the lift's fully automated. You push a button, or you can use an app now, and you make one call, and it tells you which lift to go to. You get in the lift. You don't push any buttons anymore on these destination control packages, and it can take you up 50, 60 floors, and you get out, and there's no one managing it. It's automated, and the system we've adopted from that. So if you just explain this business flow, so if you go through the steps of what it is that we've unpacked at Canary Wharf. So
if I look at it from firstly how I understood it when I first was introduced to it. When I was looking at it, it was, so at this stage, I've got my job description, which tells me what I should be doing on a holistic basis. And in a way, job descriptions are written in a way to, you know, attract a breadth of candidates. So when I was introduced to the Business-Flow-Workbook, I've walked in there with an understanding of this is what I'm supposed to be doing in some form of department. What the business flow does is it takes your department, your business function, and it breaks it down so that everyone can understand what the flow of, so what the cycle of success is, what are the steps that we would need to do as an individual or as part of this business unit in order for us to achieve what our objectives are. So if you look at it from say like a big picture, what you've got is something that's going to tell you how your business is going to operate. Then it will break it down into 6 key sections, which in a way will flow into each other. So then you can start to understand that at any stage whilst you're working in this department, you've got a set of guidance and rules which kind of outline what your role is in the department and how it aligns to everyone else's role in the department to all bring it together to achieve what it is that we're set out to achieve. So if you look at it more as like a business manager, which I'm trying to look at it as now, it gives you straight lines and clear foundations from which your department should operate. It provides people understanding of how our department flows, what their interface is with that flow, and what they need to do on a day-by-day basis, week-by-week basis, or month-by-month basis to play their part within the department to deliver the success. It also allows you to look at your department in a simple way to understand how it flows, to understand each different component and how it interfaces with each other, to understand how, if everything you've set out as, you know, your steps, your processes and procedures will actually interface and interlink to lead to being successful. So then if you took it to my experience when I walked into the job, I've got an understanding of lifts, I've got an understanding of what my job's supposed to be. What the business flow gave me was almost like a clear induction sheet. So here's 15 tasks that make up the job that you do. Here's a description of them. Here's all the baseline information you need to know to undertake this activity. And this is how frequently you need to do it. So I was on day one, I've looked at this employee interface, and I'm looking at it thinking, okay, so I need to do step 1, step 2, step 3. And I thought, oh, I'll just take it from step 1. Oh, this is permits. I need to go into this system. I'll go and download the system, go through it, do everything as the interface had showed me. And what I'd realized is that it allowed me to go on to this role, undertake the induction without, say, having someone saying, look, today you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. At 2 o'clock, you need to do this. it was a case where I kind of walked into this job that was made for me. So, hey, Eze, here's your computer, here's your desk. Then I've just started working. I've started working through the induction.
Come back to the permits, because so you've got the employee interface, and it's got a list of so processes and procedures. So the permits is something that is done on a daily basis.
Yeah, daily basis.
So then you've got a week planner that just shows you what you should be doing on a weekly, daily, monthly basis.
Yeah.
I mean, my business podcast, I'm meant to be doing one a month. So I've got the formula of what I do in terms of creating content. So come back to the start then. So the first stage of the Business Flow Workbook for the business model is
onboarding.
Onboarding.
Yeah.
So this is where someone's built new lifts in a new building, or we've made major works on some existing lifts and we're putting them back into the system.
Yeah. So with the, say, onboarding, this is exactly what you said on the tin. This is just taking our new lifts, whether they be newly constructed lifts by contractors, or whether they be lifts that we've modernized that come to the end of their life, and now we're putting them back into our portfolio. The most important thing is whether it's a new construction or whether it's a modernization, we onboard it the same way. It's still a lift. You know, we still require the same amount of information about it. It may be managed by a building owner, it might be managed by a retail department, but nevertheless, our process of how we're going to onboard it will remain the same. So
this first stage, you're taking a lift and then putting it through a system where we can drop it on to the next stage of its cycle. So we have an onboarding system within that system. And at some point, what triggers that from going from onboarding into the next one, which is service? There's three then that are sort of sit within a family of regular maintenance, which is what are the three that.
So if we were to take it through, so you onboard the lifts, and how it's determined is that we've got a checklist. It's something straightforward is, have you got document 1, document 2, document 3? Has everything been closed out? Essentially, so that you just take a list against a suite of documents and you can easily compare. Nothing too onerous. So once that's been completed and everything and all the documentation is in place that you're able to present it to the end user, then that list's able to be fully onboarded, which then it goes into the next section, which is service. And that is essentially what it says. We service the lift. So that's, we've got to do our routine. We've got to do our routine PPMs. We've got to do our audits on our service providers.
Which is a quality. There's 3 sections there, and there's service, quality, and minor projects.
Yes. And those two come out as a part of doing the service. So whilst you're doing your ongoing service, you've got your quality inspections, you've got your LOLA and your insurance inspections, which are 6 monthly in routine. You've got your own inspections on the projects. And also while servicing, you know, things break down. You know, you have breakdowns, unfortunately, in some cases you have trappings. And what comes out of that is, say you've got an issue and the lift can't be fixed in one day, and you need to maybe do something a bit. Let's say, for example, a diverter wheel's gone at the top of the shaft. That's not going to be a quick 2 men into the shaft, remove and replace. That's going to require us to, you know, do works that are going to exceed 1 day, and then we'll call that a minor project, and then we would manage it in such a fashion. So that would almost, those 2 sections, the quality and the minor projects, kind of dovetail nicely with the service section, but the service section is ongoing throughout its life cycle, and the quality and the minor projects come out as 2 kind of offshoots of the service section.
So a lift sits in those 3 cycles constantly throughout its life cycle until it starts to trigger aspects that take it into the next section.
Yeah, which is initially life cycling, which is almost reviewing your assets on a say monthly basis against its age, its reliability, how many years it's been in service, how many call outs, how many trappings, number of uses. So you analyze the lift's data using the outcomes of the service, the quality, the minor projects, to really determine whether this lift needs to be modernized or exchanged for modernized for a new lift at a certain date. It could be, usually these lifts have say about 20-year lifespans, but through repeated use, or, you know, say for example, that a lift was designed for initial purpose, but everything afterwards around the building's changed, and now it's used in a completely different way that absolutely batters the lift, then it might only have 5-10 year lifespan. It's quite frequent. And I guess that's, of that offshoot, one of the things that's most interesting about this road, because it's in the life cycle, we're using how the public interface with these units that we've designed to undertake a purpose. So we review how that lift is performing against its purpose. If its purpose has changed, we initially using this just to move 1 or 2 people in a say a 4-hour period. I know that does sound unlikely, but you could have disabled access lifts near stairs where they don't get used too frequently. And all of a sudden, a nursery opens up next door to it, and every day it's got the most traffic, it's the most busiest lift out of the blue. You know, that's going to have an effect on its life cycle. Yeah. And that's what you're doing in that section, to really assess how long it's going to take to this point where these lifts need to be modernized or changed to suit its new use.
Yeah, and within those components, there's systems that we use that we've designed. So there's a back in service, there's a contractor review meeting agenda, which is set to have meetings to manage, you know, the portfolio of the lifts with whatever contractors maintaining it. So the quality inspections are standard, where we do visual inspections on them, and you've got insurance people that have got a standard. So there's all of the components and tools that are built within the Business-Flow Workbook for you to use as an employee's interface to carry out those systems. Because when we started, I think what you've done is you've elaborated on the employees' roles and responsibilities and given more depth in what and how you do those tasks. So anyone that steps into the role now, they've got a really tailored glove that you've engineered in the Business-Flow Workbook with the employee interface for that role to be able to come in and function and know exactly what they're doing, when and why. Which is, I think that's one of the good things about the Business-Flow Workbook, is understanding. Initially, it came from a book called, I can't remember the name of it now. And it basically talks about creating a business like a recipe for making a cake. You know, once you've got that formula there with all the ingredients you need, the measurements, someone can take that process through, and everyone can make a scone as long as they follow that format. And having that point of reference to go back to know what you should be doing on a weekly basis. You know, like a walk around to visually check all of the units, or a standard, or an audit on a weekly basis to measure and monitor all of the things that the service contractor are doing. So that takes us into number 5, and then the last one after life cycling
is our major projects. And that could be a refurb, it could be modernization, it could be, oh, we've got a lift that we've got to rip out and completely install a new lift, replace a hydraulic system with a traction lift. And these projects really vary from one lift up until, you know, modernization of a 30-story building. What is important is that in this section, how we manage projects from the small scale to the large scale remains similar, very similar in how because I say a lift is a lift, whether you're doing 1 or you're doing 30. You know, you still got the core fundamental checks and processes, procedures of a project that you need to adhere to. Whether you're doing 1 lift or you're doing 20, you need a pre-start checklist so everyone understands what the requirements are. You know, you're going to need to have hold points at your guide rails and your entrances if you are doing a modernization to that degree. So, you know, there's always going to be those hold points that you're going to need to follow. There's always going to be these documentations you're going to have to do. If you think about it, like at the beginning of the business flow, you're always going to have to onboard these lifts at the end. So there's always going to be those set pieces, those, you know, different actions which are going to need to be undertaken throughout this major project in order to lead to successful outcomes. So then it's like you said, we take this section and we break it down into a further 6 sections, which give you what needs to be done at each different, what needs to be done in this section in order to achieve project success. So we take the projects, for example, we split it down. We've got, you know, a pre-start, we've got kickoff meetings, we've got So you've got pre-start, you've got before you go live, you've got live, commissioning, handover, and within each of these sections, we've got further descriptions of what needs to be undertaken, different hold points, so you know that you don't go too far without all of these documents or these contractual agreements in place. And it's robust. Everything can always be improved. But what's important is it gives people clear lines to follow, because everyone has these experiences when you go into work, you've got your plan for the week, everything seems fantastic and rosy, and then all of a sudden, for 3 days, you're doing nothing along what you had planned to do. At the end of that period, sometimes things can get really overwhelming. You can sit there like, oh, what do I do? Or you just look at your roles and responsibilities and see what you have done and what you haven't. So if you're supposed to be doing 3 walkarounds, say 4 walkarounds a month, and you haven't done one for 2 weeks, that's what you need to integrate that back into your work to get back to what needs to be done. It's fantastic.
I think there's a plumb line up there. What I do, and this is where I think this where I come about with coaching is getting back to this stance. So this Fibonacci shape that I've got on the t-shirt, it's the same. E-Myth was the book that I read, was the sort of foundation of this, together with a few others and some business coaching I had, was this set piece, and using the same analogies as boxing, as having this stance.
Yeah.
So in boxing, you've got your chin down, your hands up, your elbows in, you bend your knees, you bend your toes, and you keep moving. This is what you go back to, and you're constantly being reminded when you're training to get back. Chin down, hands up is having that point of reference. One of the other things that we've got is this WIP review. So your leader has got a work in progress system where they check in with you and then basically test the points of where you should be in that system. It's a bit like me having a boxing coach in the corner saying, are you on your toes? Are you keep your knees bent, keep your hands up, keep your stance there, keep centered, keep your chin down. That WIP review keeps you accountable for what's going on, which is another aspect of what comes within a Business-Flow-Workbook. So it all sounds a little bit geeky maybe with these steps and this efficiency and these analogies of engineering. But one thing that I wanted to touch base on was when you started, it wasn't long. One, I think you formed into the role really quick. Now, I think there was some experience there with knowing Canary Wharf. But I think this is also this shoe that fitted in terms of knowing what you should do on a daily basis. But one of the things you'd said that caught me from a powerful point of view was you felt before like you was getting up in the morning already 3-0 down. And now you felt when you came to work, you was 3-0 up.
Yeah.
Just talk to that, because if they were goals, say, and you were scoring something to get to that position, what do you think those points were that made a difference in how you felt when you came to work? Because all this Business-Flow workbook's fine, but like, what's the point? and before and after, you want to understand, well, why is it worth investing in understanding how does your business flow? Like I know if I remember being in a pub once, and I'd been kickboxing when I was younger for a while. And I remember at the end of the pub, it all kicked off and there was pool balls getting thrown everywhere. And I remember all my mates getting really sort of like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? And I remember feeling this like warm, funny, like I remember smiling. And it wasn't like I'm going to be able to do anything. I just remember knowing that I had a system, that I knew something to go to. It wasn't like I've got to figure something out. I knew exactly how I would stand. I had this comfortability in knowing these lines to try and hold form to be able to perform, and it's, so what would you say those points were that made a difference?
Oh, I would say it comes back to, a lot of it is, so when you start, firstly, take it when you start in the day, when you wake up in the morning, the feeling that you have when you're going in, because sometimes it's overlooked that, you wake up in the morning, you don't want to get out of bed. It takes you half an hour to get out of bed, because when you're walking in, you're going into the complete abyss of the unknown. It's anything, the fear of what could happen, because truthfully, at some stage, anything's possible. It sounds like, okay, calm down. It's just a normal day at work. But when that gets into your every single day, you start to, I don't know, you go into work, you're apprehensive. You know, you're not exactly sure if the plan that you set out to do for the day is adequate enough, because, you know, you only made it yesterday and you haven't had a chance to speak to the rest of the team. And the projects are 24/7. So there's so many things that are happening all at the same time, and different bits of information all flying in from you at once. And the only time that you have to process it is out of your working hours, because you've got too many things to do on a working day. You know, that feeling of being consistently overwhelmed with, you know, what needs to be done, and trying to, you know, piece it out to go into different people and get people aligned to a project. It always felt never ending. As soon as you finish making a plan, as soon as you start executing it, you're revising the plan straight away.
I always talk to clients. Like, one of the things in boxing is you only throw one punch before you throw the other. And there's a great statement in a book, I think it's Time Warrior, that first things first, second things, there are no second things. And this form of instead of going like that in life, that you've got some control and a system. I think certainty is a word that has come up before in knowing that, and or distance and boundaries, because there's a system. I always say to clients when we're talking about this, you go to McDonald's and ask for cheese on toast.
Yeah.
And they look at the menu and it's like, they don't even have a toaster.
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
even, you know, they've probably got a form of cheese, but they don't even have a toaster. So it's not on the menu, it's not on the system. They've got a business model that works. And that's probably a great example of a processed system. You know, even what you wear, there's no question you wear one of these things on this employee's menu. You know, so these are set pieces and stances that people can fall within. And even having space to be creative, you can manage it where you have an hour to be artistic, but it's still a space that's been created to have no system, and that's a system. But these, so words like certainty. What other things do you think are you getting from either having a system, or did you suffer from not before? Now, what was the -3 in your role before that made you not want to get out of bed as much? What was those things that, so you come in was uncertainty with some of what was going on in your day, not knowing.
Yeah. Also a lack of alignment. So we always have we have clear roles within the team. However, there's no actual clear responsibilities of what each person has to do. So then you have a system where from the bottom to the top, I mean, down to the engineers, down to the 2 levels of directors above you, everyone's got a different opinion of how everyone in that team should be operating. And all it allowed for is for a lot of things to not get done, because everyone's got an opinion that someone else should do something. And then it got to a level where even after the fact, even after the things happened and we have to rectify it, no one can agree with who should be undertaking what. I mean, there's, say, about 60% of the work that needed to be done could be easily be assigned. By that 40% were just left up in the air. And you could go away yourself like, I think this is what you have to do, or I think this is what someone else has got to do. But from my level to above, no one would actually agree whether that was actually their role or not. So what you've got is loads of grey areas where a lot of things could get done or not get done. And what that really presented was a lot of risk. So you go into a day, you've aligned all your roles, but you don't know if anyone's going to do it. You know, that's at the end of the day, you ask some people to do 10 things, and you have to go away each day and actually find out if anyone did these 10 things, and then replan them for tomorrow, where you've got to do another 10 things. The reality is, you guys need to do 50 things in that day, but you know, you're 40 things behind, so you're forever slowly falling further and further behind. And as you get to trying to align yourself to catching up, you get further and further away, because no one's aligned on how we're going to execute this as a team to get over the line. And then as much as you went up the structure, it was simple. No one really agreed on how each team should be, or each project should be executing it as actually like a structure, as a management team. You see that there was so many different, you know, ways to do it. So the reason why it became so challenging is because these projects are wide ranging. They're so large, but because you don't understand the roles and responsibilities of your team, or everyone doesn't, everyone's not aligned, you can't clearly assess if you have enough resources to undertake the job. And that became even more of a struggle because in reality, we didn't think we had enough people, but we couldn't understand how each person was supposed to interface and interlink to understand how many people were missing. So you'd say, oh no, I need 2 more people. What are these people going to be doing? Well, I mean, it's these 6 things that haven't been done. We need this help, but you don't know if there's a better way to make use of that person to really interface and deliver success. So it was that lack of clarity on how we were going to each position ourselves to interface and deliver the success.
I think the other thing that's missing as well is you're not getting to unpack your personal power, as in you haven't got that space to deliver because you're doing this the whole time. You never really unpack and smash the shit out of anything.
Yeah.
Because you're too busy. It's like pulling punches and not forming punches fully. I remember watching the England in the World Cup and watching them, giving them set pieces and looking at bits of paper before the players went on to talk about set pieces, and this repetition time after time after time is this form that once you've got in it and you know where you are in this process, you don't pour boiling water when you make a cup of tea without getting the cup out. My daughter and me joked because one of her boyfriends put the milk in and the tea bag and then the water, and we was like, you don't put the milk in till afterwards. And we was like, that's how you make a good cup of tea. And there's a joke in our house that's how my son's just bought a new mug. And I'm looking at it thinking that's not a good mug for making a cup of tea. It's one of these feature things, a Wallace and Gromit thing on it. And it's like all the little components in how I make a cup of tea. There's a system in it. There's a formula. There's a process. And when we start unpacking that with that and start engineering that form to be able to take us through a cycle, bang, 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 bang. If you watch Mayweather boxing, it seems seamless, those combination of punches that he's practiced over and over and over again, the set pieces that's been delivered over and over and over again, that within them you get the knockouts, but without having them, it doesn't put you in a position to be able to smash the shit out of the day. Yeah. So coming in with a plan and a system of this is the stuff I need to be doing daily. And I like the idea that the recovery rate in fitness, how quick can you get back to a good point? If you go and run a mile, and give it all you've got and come back, how long does it take you to get back to a resting pulse? And it's the same in your day. Like you can get pushed, your whole afternoon can get pushed out. How quick can you get back to, or know what it is you're getting back to, and not just get pushed off of line. And what happens is you lose that point of reference. So like a plumb line in a lift shaft, if we started plumbing up the lift shaft and moved the line slightly 10 mil, and that kept moving 10 mil, by the time we got to the top on a 50 floor, 60 floor lift, we'd be a meter out.
Yeah.
It's coming back and finding that point of reference and getting back to it every time in what should you be doing today? And this WIP review with you on a weekly basis gets you back to what are you doing this week? Yeah. Where are you going to be by this next week? And it just tracks that system. And this is leadership in making sure that there's not a slip of a lack of traction, or you're not sliding into 3 or 4 weeks when it should have taken you 1. Like what's going on? Then for me with coaching, this is where the Business-Flow-Workbook came in, because you start coaching people and they'll be like, oh, I haven't done that because I've been doing X, Y, and Z. And you'll be like, I think you said that last week. Like, let's start getting clear. And why are we losing traction on what we're saying? Oh, well, because someone comes in and they talk to me and I go off and do X, Y, and Z. Well, stop talking to them. Yeah. It's finding that integrity in people. And at some level, in some businesses, you don't need this. If they're making that much money and they're efficient, and customers have to go to them, or, there's certain companies that don't need this efficiency. But when you get like a lift to a certain stage, you need to engineer more efficient, more integral parts to make sure that process works. Yeah. So what are some other words that you'd say would had affected your improvement of starting your day at -3 and versus the +3 you feel now?
So I would say it's a lot of it's in those difficult moments. A lot when you've had an issue on site or had an issue with a plan, and you've gone off on a wild goose chase for a week, and now you've completed that. What's next? Where do you go? At those points, after finishing something, you would feel more lost than you'd ever been, because to then try and reintegrate yourself into the system, you have to actually then at that point be like, okay, I've done that. Now what the hell was going on here? I'm looking around. Wait, that's 3 weeks out. And then it was just a continuous battle through chaos. So I would say that the main bulk of coming into work feeling 3-0 down came from being in a position where you're consistently setting up plans for people to execute, being at home whilst it's a night shift, you hear that your plan's gone to absolute crap. And then you've got a client meeting in the morning and you're walking in there, you'd be like, well, I'm the only person who knows that nothing got done last night, but what do I do now? Do I go in there? Do I just take this beating from the client as I did last week, or do I try and fix it? You do both, but that becomes a continuous battle where each day you're walking in and you're like, I've got to go in and brief people about how they've got to start putting entrances in from level 15. Difference is that we've got the wrong entrances on site and they found out last night. So we actually can't do anything. And you're walking in like, okay, I've got to rejig this plan. I've got to rejig this plan. And every day you're rejigging plans to a point where you're like, a week ago, the first plan I made, how close is it to this plan that I'm working to now? And you'd realize that, no, there's completely two different tangents. So it's that continuous feeling of being lost in how you're supposed to execute. But at the same time, feeling to yourself that, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm skilled in this. I'm not an idiot. So why do I feel like an idiot all the time?
Yeah, it's funny. So so this drilling down this process into a stage where, so for example, like a minor project where someone's going to be fitting an entrance or something. What we've done when we drill down into this minor project is drill down into, so how do you do a minor project? Now, to get to a stage where you're going in the office and saying that you haven't done it is too late. It's like the lift that slid past. Because what happens with the lift, there's a few things why it might slide past its level. Is one, it's not had the signal to see it, is coming in too slow, this process of coming in and stopping, or the integrity is lost and it's sliding past because it's overworked or it's unbalanced or the components haven't got the integrity to hold its form. And it's why with coaching this is good, because if you've got a project, again, like if you've got a project that, or a team that aren't delivering on time, is then breaking it down into the process. So what are they doing? So where are they starting in terms of designing what they plan to do? Yeah. What are they doing in terms of the process of getting in a position to be able to even say, I'm ready? And then what are they, and these slow steps, because so on a lift, you might have 20, 30, 40 entrances, but the lift just says, oh, the door's shut. And it just says you might have number 10 and 11. As long as you've got power on 10 and you've got power on 11, the lift thinks the doors are shut. But you might have 15 doors and one of them might not be open. So it just thinks one of the doors or the doors aren't shut. And this system is drilling into, having a point of 1 to 15 that we can measure to see, well, it's actually the fourth door. And then we shut the fourth door and it might go to the sixth door and then it comes to the 14. So you know that there's 2 doors that weren't open, not the whole system. And this drilling into the processes in the Business-Flow-Workbook is, in boxing, people think you're just going to smash the shit out of someone, but there's components into that. One is being conscious enough to see an opportunity. 2 is getting in a position to take that opportunity, and it might be stepping, sliding, it might be moving, and then is the form of delivering that. And then once he's finished, he's getting back in a position. So there's so many components in it that once you've got that started, you've then got to take that and get that in position for you to be able to be ready to deliver it to the next department. And then that process just keeps going on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's easy to see if anything does go wrong in these processes or anything needs to be improved. You've got a clear guideline of what needed to be done, so you can easily see what what failed in the process. And that was one thing I found difficult in the last role, is just that things were going wrong a lot, and you actually didn't really understand what were the root cause of things going wrong. They just went wrong. And then it became almost like an exception that things just go wrong without us actually, you know, and we tried to look into it sometimes, but we all had a different opinion of what we were all trying to do. So it was misaligned from the start. Whereas now, say that not everything goes perfectly every week. You know, we do have issues, we do have challenges, but the difference is it's clear lines of accountability. So when something crops up, I know whether I should be doing it or whether someone else should be doing it within a moment's instance. I don't need to sit around and be like, oh, let me speak to this guy. No, I would say, okay, that sits within my responsibility, or it doesn't, or there's an interface. These are my parts that that's responsible for. Let me deliver these and pass it on to the next person. It only allows me to be aligned to what I do, but it allows me to align others to how we're going to be successful.
Yeah, it's a bit like a football goalie running up the field to try and take a goal, and then no one being left in goal. And you know, so everyone knows their form on a professional football pitch. You know, everyone knows where they should cover. Everyone knows their responsibility, and when they're aligned to that system with set pieces, then you start seeing a flow in what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things, because this lift analogy, I like. It's been easy setting it up. You know, if we got a set of joins for a lift, and you say there's a problem on the lift car, you know, I can go to a certain page that tells me all about the lift car, and it might be the lift car doors, and it drills into another page where it's lift car doors, and then it might be the light rays that stop the doors from shutting. So you get to a point where you can really find, like you said, the core of what should be going on, and find out where we haven't got what we should have. But coming back, there was one thing that we, on looking at, I think it was Canary Wharf website, there was quite a lot of stuff, because I always, in business coaching, and I found a better way of saying it, that I want to go to the business owner and say that I want to come through the business and smash the shit out of you. And I was trying to find a mentor that could help me find a better way of saying it. But it's a bit like when someone comes and tests a lift, they want to find all of the problems and all of the situations. So getting to a stage where we could say to the manager, okay, we've got our business model, our business unit, our department, 100% unstoppable, and challenge it with everything. There was a few things that came up on the website. So collaboration, connection. There was some things that came up that got us to change and upgrade, like in a lift that wasn't fit for purpose, and change some of the systems. Because there was an opening there of, well, it says about collaboration in the, I think the mission statement or something that Canary Wharf had, but where in the business are we showing that we do that? And we come up with this to connect and collaborate for good. Yeah. And this is just a point where with the Business-Flow-Workbook, you can insert a certain aspect of it, like having a feature of a loadway on a lift, that suddenly that lift can't move unless the loadway says there's the right amount of load in it. So you have a component that then covers that function to make sure that lift doesn't take too many people. And when we're doing the Business-Flow-Workbook, this element that Canary Wharf was saying that we do wasn't in the system, so we input it in the system. So just talk about that.
Connect and collaborate for good. It's a very interesting concept, to be honest, especially when you take it into businesses. I think since joining, you get a very mixed reaction when you bring it up with some people. Some people, it makes them really nervous. Some people get really excited. But what I find is really interesting, it takes people out of their comfort zone, and it gets people thinking about, you know, delivery of stuff in a completely different fashion. So with Connect for Collaborate for Good, it's something that we try and keep simplistic, where it's us, and it could be one of our service providers or one of our contractors or another aligned department, and we just get together, we connect, and we establish doing something with the outcome being beneficial for someone else, whether it be a local school, community, or vulnerable people, someone who's vulnerable. And that's wide ranging. There's no real say limit on what we want to do in terms of how small. It could be a pub quiz. It could be, as we've tried to get Reese to do, body painting. You know, or it could be as what we did recently, like a toy appeal, where we get some of our contractors just to provide toys into a charity which is really run by the business. So it's it's whether it can be small, it could be massive, but the goal is for two people or more to get together to do something which has an outcome for good.
So this is a component where if we wanted to test the department lift and escalators, we could say, well, where do you connect and collaborate for good? Now you've got an agenda in the contractor review meeting where this is part of your monthly or weekly meetings with the contractors that maintain the lifts. So it's something we can pinpoint in the circuit, in the system, to show that that's where we do it. There's an agenda. So this is the stuff that we're talking about in terms of moving forward for it, and then the marketing side of stuff, and all of those outcomes can be shown as a result of what's going on. So, and this is where I think the Business-Flow-Workbook, if you come back and say, okay, well, how do you ensure, and this is testing, how do you ensure that lift and escalators make sure that lifts are in service in a safe and comprehensive way? You know, if you just go through what the aspects are that I can prove to the owner of Canary Wharf that this is where we're doing it. You've got your outside insurance companies, you've got your regular service visits, we've got internal audits. There's a call out system for any lifts that are out of service. There's documentation to cover all of that. So it makes it unstoppable, every aspect, where we can sleep at night knowing that these lifts are operating in service. They're running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no one maintaining them. But we've got a system that can cover and operate and function to maintain them in an automated system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense.
So is there anything else? So before and afters, again, benefits of having the system, because it just created another interface for someone new. There's a job role open for someone new coming in. Designing, having that system to be able to pick and take those functions into a new job role and create a new employee's interface has seemed to be easier.
Yeah. So I would describe it. The benefits is, one of the biggest benefits is actually one of the examples that we're doing now. So we've got this system in place. We've got our 6 sections. We understand how everything's going to be undertaken. Now, there's a major change that's happened outside of our department that affects our department, and it's changed our demands of what we need to do on a day-by-day basis. Now, because we understand everything that we're supposed to be doing as a department, we can easily pinpoint what this change will affect and how it will affect it. And then we can assign how much time it's going to add to the department. Then what we've identified easily is that, okay, we've got this much additional time, say it's 700 hours over a year, where we need to get this fulfilled. So we need to add another person into that role. So we need to add someone into the department. So then what we've learned is that, okay, we need to add someone into the department. Let's look at all the gaps that we have across our 6 functions, how this change is going to affect it, and what that job role is going to be. So we write the job role, then we analyze it back against the business flow to see if the person or the profile that we've written for, how is that actually going to interface into what we're doing? And is that going to align for us to be successful? Now, that sounds complicated, but it's actually very, very straightforward with the Business-Flow-Workbook. It's as simple as just adding a task in a time study, because you know how you already know all the other, say, 6 tasks that needs to be done in this function. You know, I add one more task in. What's the impact on those 6 and the overall time that we have? It's becomes, changing different business functions becomes simple mathematics to then decide what you need to do to move forward. So I would say the biggest benefit of it will be when this person comes into that role, how automated their induction will be. I think sometimes, at least in my past experience, inducting people into a business becomes very onerous, where you start to look at, when I add someone to this business, I'm going to lose so much time for me trying to get this person up to speed. That whole 3-month period when they're here is actually going to be a burden, because you're having to teach somebody what they need to do. But you'll have a clear interface and clear structure that this person needs to fulfill. So on your day one, you'll be able to give them this employee's interface and have them test it, just to see whether your business system's working and how easy they're able to integrate. So you have a twofold verification and also an easier induction process where you're not sat over someone's shoulder every 5 minutes saying, okay, you done with that? It's now time to do this. You know, you can actually get them in the first week and be like, well, here's your task for the first week, you know, have a go.
Yeah, I think people underestimate is getting into that state of flow. And I think a lot of businesses, it's a stop, start, because they haven't engineered. One is a system of what should be happening in what sequence. So, you know, like making a cup of tea, that you get things out, you know, in certain ways. Some roles, they're not laid out like that. So you've got to make it up. You're thinking all the time instead of just flowing. Yeah. And this is where I think breaking it down into this system helps. And it's interesting that until, like you say, you feel that difference in flow, like saying you get up feeling like you're 3-0 down. Like that's a feeling.
Yeah.
And then come to work like you're 3-0 up. There's quite a powerful state in how you want to come to work by design. And engineering, spending a little bit of time engineering that process and that system is worth it, because how more efficient are you in that space? And not just how more efficient are you, how much do you feel like staying on and getting up and coming into work when every day's 3-0 up? You're starting 3-0 up, you know?
Yeah, it's important. And it's one thing it's taught me is about, you know, how you can get the best out of actual people. You know, I think sometimes when business people get lost we actually realize it's people that are delivering different aspects of your function in order for you to be successful. So by default, if you're able to have the positive morale, these people can come with a positive morale, it's going to have a positive effect on their efficiency and their effectiveness at work. I've seen a massive change with how I approach each day and how I get up and I get to work each day. You know, everything flows better, everything, you know, feels better. And it also allows me to execute. I also feel now I have the time to be successful. You know, it's a really weird concept. You know, my hours haven't changed in terms of how many hours I had to do a job. But now, even with the biggest challenges, even in my busiest weeks, I still feel that, you know, I'm going to be successful. You know, don't have that fear of failure overwhelming, because I know what it is that needs to be done in order to be successful. And if something has an impact on what I'm doing, I can easily explain it to my boss. We can sit down and we can realign to see how we're going to tackle it, so that we're able to be aligned, things become easier. We don't have that overwhelming scenario where we feel like, the world's about to crush me. I've got too much to do. It's kind of actually, you know, hang on a second. This is what I had to do. This is what's been added. This is what we're going to do about it, you know. And
I think that has to be given some respect in openness of that leader in terms of developing a role and being open to that loop of feedback and engineering that with review, because leaders that are closed, this is what you do. And there's a difference between this is what you do and this is why you do it. You know, this system and this openness of flow. It's I see it in a lot of businesses where you could come up with this system, but unless you get a leader to lead the system, the water runs down. And this has to start at the top of the businesses and come down, because otherwise someone's going to piss in the stream somewhere and you've got no control of it as the water flows down. You know, having this system at a high level and then flowing down, it's the same on a lift, that you have that controller and then everything comes from that one point of control.
Yeah, and when we talk about, say, the automation, a big part of it is, say, like holidays and sickness. Like on the whip that we're discussing, that work in progress with you, where you kind of outline what tasks you've got open and when you're going to have them completed by in each section, and we review it. If for any reason someone goes sick or someone goes on holiday, that's their handover, a live document ready there, handover in a moment's notice. You know, we're able to cover for people. You know, we've got a more, you know, a dynamic feel. We don't feel as constrained. You know, that if you are going on holiday, for example, you know, your handover is almost written before you start it. You know, you can sit there with a review with your boss and say, if someone's coming to cover, and be like, well, you know, okay, I sent this email here at 2:00. Here's the email. Here's the list of all the activities that we've got coming up in the next week. This is everything that I'm currently working at this moment in time. Here you are, you know, and they can edit it, close activities, add new activities. So when you come back, you can see exactly what's changed, what's live, what's the priority, full if the comfort that the whole department is aligned to what's doing this. You know, you don't have that fear of, am I doing the wrong thing? Am I working on something else? No, we've aligned ourselves to this meeting. If you're doing something that sits outside your whip, why? How have we got about to this? Why is this more important than what we've set ourselves out to do? Because there are instances where they happen. You know, I find it very interesting that I could be, we could recently get a call from a director. They say, we want this. And it could have a massive change on what we were planning to do. But how we analyze it and get to the point of where we actually going to go and approach it is so simple. Where before, as I'll hear that phone call come in and I feel like the nerves going through my system, the hair standing on my back and neck. I'm sitting there like, the plan that I haven't finished writing yet, it's got to change. And I don't know what we were supposed to be doing in 3 weeks. So how am I supposed to now plan the next 10 days to execute this thing? You know,
I think coming back into boxing, like, unless you can, and this is stance where you're coming from, unless you can manage yourself, you can get pushed into corners and bent over the ropes and all sorts of shit. And unless you can keep that form and hold that stance in where you're at, there's so many crossovers with the analogies of it all. It's just it's just immense. But I think we smashed it. Is there anything else you think we've missed in terms of the business flow workbook and where you are with what you've done? How long has it been now since you've been?
So I think it's come up to the end of 4 months.
Yeah, so within 4 months. I mean, I remember saying in about 2 weeks that you were pretty good to go within a short time, having that system. So within 4 months, a lot of people, that's still their probation period, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I felt really comfortable. I think that was probably one of the biggest, selling points to me, was like how unique it made me feel walking into that role. How easy everything felt, like how simple everything felt. And what I was doing wasn't simple by any stretch of the imagination. I've never done it before. You know, I've never been introduced to this side of the business, but I just felt like it made so much sense. And everything was lined in a way for me to go out and just get myself set up in a role. And I keep saying it, but I've got, and now this, I'm prospectively looking to hire someone to work as an assistant underneath me. I have no fear about them starting introduction in the role. I don't feel it's going to have any negative burden on me and how I go into execute. I don't think it's going to be any burden to anyone in the department. And what I really think is important is that people understand the value in hiring someone and making them feel like they can contribute value quickly. And then sometimes it's how quickly can you get someone into being able to contribute in that role, and how much of the time are you going to dedicate or have to dedicate to, you know, almost holding their hand through this period. And we're having the business flow in place, I would say that you're not going to hold their hand at all, and two, they're going to be able to get up to speed really quickly. And where their induction will be more of questions where they're testing their understanding. Like something's there, they just don't actually understand it. And then you have a question. Because I would actually probably take maybe 20 minutes of boss's time with induction questions. And they all come with one hit. I'll be like, okay, I've done all of this. I'll be like, well, I didn't quite understand this. And then the questions, and it flows so much easier.
I like this. So we've got the structure. I use boxing, engineering and gardening. So that trellis is that form that you give a plant to cling to. Yeah. And it's those set pieces of, say, 6 things that are standard that you do. Like this, that's how you manage the department. There's 6 sections that manages the department. And then with each section, there's 6 sections. And that form of this is what you do, it's your go-to, it's what you stand on, it's the structure you have. Like you don't probably reference the employees interface now, because you can stand alone. That system is something you can go back to if you need to, but it's not something you're referencing, every day now, because you formed the strong foundation to stand alone. But when you started, that employees interface was everything, couldn't it? It was the go-to.
Yeah, And then what if you look at it also when say this assistant manager starts, I'll give him his employee interface and I'll give him mine.
Yeah.
And you can easily see what I'm doing on a day by day, week, and monthly basis, and what he'll be doing or she'll be doing, because you know this. It's no one kind of hiding. It's all transparent. You know, this is what we're doing.
That's the funny thing is like why, and this is where it's good for a coach because you can call people out on a system. You know, if I was boxing and like I'm not putting my hands up, my coach would smack me around the head and show me why I should keep my hands up. Now, in that scenario, like why would people not want to install something like a business flow workbook? Because I call people it's wiggling away from some accountability. So I bowed out of a one-to-one boxing session yesterday with my coach, and because I'd been and got my jab. And while I was there, or I took my daughter to get it, while I was there, they said that you and your wife can get yours. And it brought it forward a day. We haven't got to travel, so we just got our jabs done. And he's messaging me, and I'm thinking, I've eaten so much shit over the last few days, I didn't want to go. And I've sort of like, he holds me accountable for training, but I wiggled out of it to a certain extent. And I think the reason for not having this business flow workbook is not being held accountable.
Yeah.
This is the risk with some people in a role. Oh, I'll sort that out later. I'll get around to it whenever it's well, when.
Yeah.
And this accountability of having traction, like we do a traction test on a lift where we sort of slam the brakes on and see how far it's slipped. And there's a tolerance that it's allowed to do. And if it's over a certain tolerance, the integrity of the system isn't good enough. We have to make sure that it can hold its ground. And it's the same with employees. You know, if you've got someone that's got their whip review, and then each week it's like, I haven't done that yet. Oh, I'll do that next week. I'm looking into that. And it's a bit like what you'll start to see is people that slip into 1 week and 2 week. And the problem with not having that system is you haven't got a place or a system to show where they're out of integrity.
Yeah.
And that's where the work is. You know, I always talk about the work is a bit like stretching. You'll sit in this uncomfortable space of where you want to get to, and then slowly you'll start to step into it. But the whole time you're doing it, it's uncomfortable. Yeah. It's like getting fit and going to the gym. Like it's not easy. You're working to get into it, and coming back to this perfect form. You know, this Fibonacci form is holding yourself accountable to doing stuff, whether that's making your bed in the morning or washing up at the end of the night. It's keeping this form and flow of this ultimate situation, this ultimate stance, so you can smash the shit out of life.
Exactly.
Well, cheers for coming on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
I think we'll wrap it up now and leave you to enjoy the last couple of days of your holiday.
Yeah.
All right, Eze, cheers for coming on, mate. I appreciate it. I'll any links you want us to put, I'll drop in the bio, and I'll put some images up on the video when we edit it to show the business flow workbook so people can understand what we're talking about. And if you listen to us on the podcast, the game that I've been holding up to explain what we're talking about is the downfall game, which is where you have a series of cogs that you've got to get a pellet down through the system. So I'll put some videos of that up as well. So cheers. Thanks a lot, Eze.
All right, no worries. See you soon.
Cheers, mate. Take care. Bye.
All right, bye.